This is DragonCon. DragonCon is a yearly sci-fi and fantasy convention in Atlanta. It pulled in an estimated 63,000 visitors who all crammed in together, almost shoulder to shoulder, into 6 sweaty hotels. They threw one hell of a party, they put on one hell of a wrestling show, and they played a hell of a lot of games together. But despite all the odds, despite what the internet may have led you to believe, these 63,000 nerds, Trekkies, cosplayers, LARPers, Whovians, roleplayers, and gamers managed to spend 96 hours with each other, face to face, and no one got hurt. The internet has been a depressing place this August. Stories of bomb threats, prank SWAT raids, DDoS attacks, and police abuse dominated the headlines. But for those of us invested in gaming, the most devastating story of all was probably the Gamergate Scandal. If you ever need a textbook example of how offbeat incidents can snowball into international disruptions, this is it. It wasn't the sacking of a reporter who exposed a $400,000 failed game jam that rocked games media this month. It wasn't Eurogamer firing Rab Florence for calling out journalists and Jeff Keighley for their close ties with sponsors that could have ended gamers as we know it. It wasn't GameSpot executives firing Jeff Gersman over a negative review that caused people to get this angry about games journalism. No, corporate corruption is not what set everyone off. It was allegations of unmarried infidelity by a heartbroken ex-boyfriend. This gradually sparked a complicated series of events that resulted in the departures of 2 awards-winning games writers who were not closely connected to that original drama. These events caused The Escapists to revise their ethics policy and Kotaku to disallow reporters from supporting indie dev Patreon campaigns. At the heart of all these events lies a discussion about journalistic ethics and disclosure. It's about harassment, death threats, and online mobs. It's about equality and fairness. It's about freedom of speech, online anonymity, and self-identification, censorship and hacking. It's about the conflict between public policy and private habits, about lofty idealism juxtaposing with unflattering reality. It is multifaceted and complex. And for the past month, it has been a white-hot topic. On Memorial Day weekend at DragonCon, the controversy was at its boiling point. But no one there really seemed to want to talk about it. Out of all the conversations I had, only one person openly brought it up before I did. Everyone else either heavily beat around the bush first, dropped it all together, or didn't know what the hell I was talking about. At panels, it was introduced by guests with careful disclaimers, and it was shut down by panelists with quick rebuttals. That's a stark contrast to the conversation happening online, where it is dominant, despite being such a sensitive topic. And maybe that's because the understandable and valid concerns expressed by Gamergate supporters are voiced by a conspiratist fringe, a group of people who believe in a narrative of
sex for favors,
even though those favors don't seem to exist. What does exist, though, are close friendships and financial contributions made between many indie developers and writers. Both of these groups are working within a system that encourages and requires them to get that close with one another. The game industry is small. It is concentrated into like 5 cities, and getting your foot in the door may require you to move away to one of those cities. It may require connections, and those connections may lead to friendships, and that is not a conspiracy, but that's also not entirely okay. As the weeks went on, the discussions became less about
sex for favors
and more about the relationships that were visible to the rest of us, out in the open. I was eventually relieved to see Gamergaters condemn harassment. Even though, granted, this is the internet and that's not going to stop it, I was relieved to see them raise money for a good cause, even if it started as a means to save face. If Kotaku and The Escapist changed their policies in the wake of this scandal, then that means their concerns must not have been irrelevant. Editors took them seriously enough to consider them valid, and they made changes because of them. Maybe all of this actually started last year, during the days when I was covering GDC 2013. I remember sitting in the common room of a hostel in San Francisco. I was editing video when I saw a few tweets from a group of journalists and developers that kind of weirded me out. Not just because they were all getting dinner and having a jolly good time together, but because they were publicly announcing when and where they would be, opening themselves up for any stranger from the internet to crash their meal. Since then, I've come to understand that when you're an online personality, announcing your place and time can be an opportunity to meet fans, colleagues, and news sources, rather than the proverbial weird internet stranger. I've learned that keeping contact with the circles you're covering gets you stories, and that those connections you have influence the stories you tell. I've learned, as a journalist, that being polite and friendly to everyone you meet benefits everyone you meet, even if you're not giving them positive press. If people get along with you anyways, they'll still want to tip you off onto stories. They'll agree to give quotes in interviews, and robbing yourself of those connections robs your readers of the stories, the perspectives, and the truths you can share with the world. But I think this month we all learned that there is a line. It probably lies somewhere between financially contributing to a source's creative projects and considering them a close friend. Impartiality and objectivity are virtually impossible for any human, but news reporting demands a certain degree of it. And so, people want disclaimers now. They want transparency. So here we go. Disclaimer: the opinions, biases, and prejudices that you hold as an individual are shaped by your experiences as an individual. For example, I was a child in a Democratic household during the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. That has nothing to do with this current situation, except for the possibility that it might have contributed to the skepticism with which I regard the current situation. I'm wondering just exactly how diligent I should be about these disclaimers from now on. So here's another one. Disclaimer: during DragonCon I had a 30-minute chat with Chris Avallone. No money changed hands, no one bought each other anything. I simply wanted to take the opportunity to get to know him better as both a fan and a critic of his games. Shortly afterwards, he publicly announced this on Twitter. Disclaimer: I had a similar conversation with Jim Sterling. No money changed hands, no one exchanged gifts, no diabolical plans, just a pleasant, good-humored conversation about topics we were mutually interested in. And shortly afterwards, I publicly announced this on Twitter. I'm kind of concerned about where I should draw my line with this stuff. While these two private encounters don't really worry me that much, the one moment that does was recorded on camera and posted on this channel.
I love your videos, man. This is going to be a very interesting video if I just tell you how clever you are, but I love your stuff. I think it's very interesting. Your Metal Gear Solid ones in particular actually massively impacted volume. Seriously. Wow. Seriously, there's like two or three kind of nuggets in there.
Disclaimer: Mike Bithell and I got along really, really well during that interview. He told me that he's a fan of my reviews and that he's using them as advice for his new game, Volume. When Volume comes out, and when I do eventually play it, my experience is going to be a little different. I didn't contribute any kind of money to the game, but I did have a bit of influence on it, which is incredibly flattering. I love the thought that my work is helping other people work, but playing the game with that knowledge is going to drastically change the experience in a way that I doubt any other person can really relate to. So I decided shortly after that interview that if I ever did any coverage of Volume, it probably wouldn't be a formal review. On the other hand, I haven't felt that uncomfortable about reviewing Wasteland 2 or Pillars of Eternity or any other game Chris Avallone may be working on. As far as I know, their development has absolutely nothing to do with me, but I did have a 30-minute chit-chat with Chris Avallone at DragonCon, so maybe it would be a good idea to vet that decision onto you guys, my viewers, first. Actually, maybe a better idea would be to pass these questions on to a higher authority, because I have a journalism degree.
There they are. The wall of shame. Hey kids, if you ever need to know what not to do in life, there you go.
And that means that I have connections with journalism experts. There's also a New York Times writer somewhere in my family tree. Does that count as nepotism? I don't know. But I did ask them a few questions, not necessarily about this scandal, but about the ubiquitous journalistic questions it has raised. Can you quickly tell us who you are and what your professional background is?
Sure. My name is Greg Lisby. I'm at the moment the Associate Chair of the Department of Communication at Georgia State University. My background is law, I have a PhD from University of Tennessee and a law degree from Georgia State, and I'm a member of the bar, the State Bar of Georgia, so I practice in Georgia. The area that I research is copyright law, and also I deal with ethics, especially ethics with regard to journalists and with regard to lawyers.
Would maintaining a friendship with a journalistic source outside of the field be a breach of journalism ethics?
And if it's not a breach of journalism ethics, you are walking a very fine line. I mean, think about it just for a second. Whether it's a family member or a friend, and let's just put the journalist aside, this is me and you as friends. What can I expect of you as a friend? What can you expect of me as a friend? Well, we would hope that each of us would try to put the other person's interest before people we don't know. I mean, that's what friends do.
How close of a friendship are we talking here? What about the need to maintain connections in an industry you were covering in order to simply know who's who and what's going on?
Well, maintaining connections is what I would call professional collegiality. That's not uncommon. But maintaining connections is not the same thing. Having a Rolodex full of names to contact about this or about that is not the same thing as friendship. So really it becomes at what point that professional relationship crosses the line. And usually the point it crosses the line is the point at which you consciously or unconsciously start doing things for the other person. How much of a gift can you receive before the gift results in you being not objective? Can I give you a Christmas card? Well, generally, I think most people would say a Christmas card would not necessarily make you biased in some way. Can I give you a gift of some value? Well, maybe, but how much value? Could I give you a ruler that had my company's name on it? You see what I'm trying to get at here? There's this line that you have to sort of go up the line. Can I take you out to dinner?
Would you say that funding a source's creative projects crosses that line?
Absolutely. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. If you're the writer and I'm the inventor or I'm the creator here in some way, and somehow we have a monetary relationship that is, we hope, going to result in my success, then for you to write about me, that's unethical.
Now, what about being roommates with a potential source?
I would say that's even worse. Now, I have heard in the political realm where people say, "Oh, I'm a political operative for this person, and she's a political operative for this person, and oh, we don't do things like that." But I think it's going to create problems.
And I guess, would you consider a sexual relationship crossing that line as well?
Absolutely.
Now, but what about say a half-hour drink and conversation at a industry event with a potential source?
And see, drinking at an event, and again, I'm assuming you're both buying your own drinks here.
Right.
That's a little harder to see because all of us go to conferences, all of us go to meetings, all of us go for some reason there to network, quote unquote, to at least let other people have some idea who we are. So to say you met somebody at a conference or you had a drink with somebody at a conference is not quite as questionable as it is if you have this type of relationship, which is a personal relationship.
Do these rules also apply for editorial writing as well as news writing, or are they held to a different standard?
I would say that they apply doubly to editorial writing because editorial writing is an opinion, and why should I trust your opinion if I don't believe that it is objective? When I mean objective, you've reached a conclusion, but you've reached a conclusion through the objective analysis of facts, searching out information, and then you bring your expertise and you say, this is what the truth of the matter is. And if that's the case, it certainly seems to me that I should believe you because that honest relationship, that truth-telling relationship, otherwise, no.
Is it ethical at all to write an editorial about, say, your experience with a loved one going through some kind of problem?
And I think you'll find that happens quite regularly, but as long as they're identified as a loved one and that I see that I, the reader, understand the relationship.
There is disclosure?
Yes.
Okay.
If I understand the relationship, I then have the ability to determine whether to believe you or not.
Okay.
And so it really is that disclosure issue.
Mitch Keller was a writer for the New York Times before retiring at the end of August. He replied to my questions via email and expressed a lot of similar thoughts to Greg Lisby. He says, ideally, a reporter will have strictly a respectful working relationship with the source. Sometimes reporters and regular sources will find over time that they have similar interests, temperaments, etc. They'll share information about their lives and their families, and it's only natural that something like friendship can develop. But degree matters here. The most important thing is that the relationship not cause any journalistic compromise. Not always easy, but crucial. According to Mitch Keller, funding a source's creative projects would absolutely be unethical, and if a closer friendship does develop, then that reporter has a responsibility to inform his editor and remove himself from the beat, and not do any more writing related to that beat or that source. Disclaimer, Greg Lisby taught my journalism classes, and Mitch Keller is an extended relative. The reality of working in a newsroom is that connections with sources have to be maintained to produce stories. The Rolodex full of names on an editor's desk, or the socialite reporter who knows everyone and their dirty secrets are both idealistic symbols you'd want to see in any functioning newsroom. The contradiction, or the sausage factory complexities shaking up that idealism, is that beat reporters who are trusted by their sources have to constantly skirt that line in order to build that trust. They're expected to maintain what Lisby called professional collegiality while also building enough of a rapport with their sources to be personally trusted. And all those complexities can affect whether or not they get hired in the first place, which the two award-winning, celebrated freelancers who left us never were. They didn't make a lot of money doing this stuff. In fact, an incredibly small minority of the voices you hear online don't have a day job. Within any kind of professional field, having a large network of connections may be a more profitable asset than actual skills. The influence of networking is powerful. It's almost normalized as an acceptable, non-controversial way to get jobs. This is reflected in something as innocuous as The Sims. Did you ever wonder why the higher tier jobs require your Sims to make friends outside of those jobs? That's also the whole idea behind LinkedIn, that a social network is also a professional asset. That's doubly true for anyone trying to make a living off gaming, due to the industry's small size and its concentration in only a few cities across the globe. So what looks like deep-rooted secret alliances to the conspirators are probably what the outside world would consider professional collegiality. These connections aren't just motivated by everyone having similar interests, but they're also motivated economically. Indie devs and freelance writers are both working within low-budget industries that don't give its practitioners much of an economic safety net from employers. They have to build it themselves. Maybe this is why so many of them had such a hard time seeing Patreon contributions as a legitimate conflict of interest, whereas so many readers were able to make that assessment easily. Professional dependence on professional connections is not meritocratic, and it shuts out a lot of good people out of a lot of good jobs. And for writers, that means less stories to cover, less perspectives, and less people and places to write about. The real lesson to be learned here, underneath all the doxing and the death threats and the toxicity of it all, is that the audience of gaming journalism is ultimately truly concerned about how insulated this business can be. What looks like a professional network of friendly acquaintances on the inside can look like an intimidating social clique from the outside. This is reflected by how much mistrust the writers and their audience feel towards one another, by how much one party doesn't consider something a conflict of interest that the other party does. It's reflected by how different their interests are and how they can't settle on the right way to express their love for video games. That's the common thread everyone on both sides of this debate has, but because we're trying to talk about it on the internet, a lot of those concerns just don't get expressed clearly. Civility, polite discussion about valid concerns takes days of fighting to accomplish online, as opposed to just being the default mode when talking to people face to face. The pundits on both sides of this conflict have important concerns to address, and to some extent they are being addressed, but you might not notice that through all the insults being thrown across the field. The online disinhibition effect is a real thing. There are little to no consequences for being a dick online, and there may actually be a whole lot of incentives to be a dick online. People turn the subjects of online discussions into symbols. Humanity degrades as anger and fear increase. Misinterpretations and slander swirl around insular communities. who conduct unprofessional investigations that reveal prejudiced readings of reality, where hive-minded versions of half-truths form the general consensus, and this has become accepted as the normal way the internet works. So during Labor Day weekend, when the internet was filled with stories of prank callers triggering real SWAT team raids, of ceaseless harassment, bomb threats, and embarrassing sex drama, I was amazed at how the attitude I had gotten myself used to online simply did not pass into reality. I think I realized that during the second night of DragonCon. Some nice stranger gave me and my friends a bottle of mead they brewed themselves, and then we all went to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Disclaimer, I volunteered at a local Rocky Horror Picture Show during college. But at DragonCon, while I was sitting there screaming my lungs out at a screen, drunk off my ass from homemade mead that a kind stranger just gave me and my friends out of the kindness of their heart, I was hit by an incredible amount of nostalgia. I was having more fun than I have had playing any video game in years. Because this was a place where people of all colors, shapes, sizes, creeds, genders, and sexes could all get together to express their love for whatever weird, nerdy thing they're into, and no one will openly hate them for it. That's almost the same role that Rocky Horror itself served in years past, as a welcoming place for an exotic, ostracized crowd to express themselves without worrying about themselves. And I fear that with the rise of online communities that espouse a similar feeling of camaraderie, people might be losing out on that face-to-face interaction and diversity that is so necessary for someone to develop politeness. Even there, at the cathedral of classlessness that is DragonCon, no one wanted to bog themselves down with drama. No one wanted their whirlwind of conflicting interests to ruin the fun. They all just wanted to get along. And for the most part, no one got hurt. Except for maybe these guys.